Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 915. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. Hey, in this video we want to answer the question, what exactly does VLOOKUP do? Or what is the purpose of VLOOKUP? Now this question comes from a student in my business math class. We did this example in class, and the student came up afterwards and says, man, I do not get it at all. What is the purpose of this VLOOKUP? Now, I remember when I learned VLOOKUP, reading about it in a textbook, I had the same thought. I was like, man, what does that do? Right? One of the problems with VLOOKUP is there's 4 arguments, and so you have to figure out what each argument in the function does. And then it's a little strange the way it looks things up. So what we want to do in this video is break it down. See how someone would look something up. Here's our average balance. And we need to determine 2 things. What is the maintenance charge and the per check charge? Now, here's a column that has the maintenance. Here's a column that has the per check charge. And depending, if this is our average balance, depending on what category we're in, that'll determine which row in the table, and thus which maintenance charge and per check charge we need to return to the cell. All right, so we're going to do it by hand, see how we humans do it, and then we'll see that VLOOKUP does it basically the same way. All right, so maintenance charge. We're going to put a formula here that uses this and finds the right maintenance charge. So VLOOKUP is going to deliver this number to the cell. All right, let's think about this. Average balance. Now humans, it's easy. We have this printed thing on our desk. We take this $1,000. We find the right category. Less than 500, or specifically 0 up to $499.99. Or this category, 500 to 1,999. Or this category, 2,000 to 599. Or 2,000 to 4,999. Or finally, the last category is 5,000 or more. So which, if we have this as our average balance, which one of these categories do we fit in? It's this one. We're between the low end of 500. It could be 500 all the way up to, it could be 1,999.99. All right. Once we've taken this, found the right category, we know which row in our table. Now this column is how VLOOKUP looks it up, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But check this out. Once you figure out the row, we take the 750, because this is maintenance charge we need to have in this cell. We type 750. In this cell right here, we need per check charge. Well, we've determined our row, so we take the 20 cents and we type it here. So notice, by hand, we had to go up to the table and get something and put it in the cell. How did we do it? We looked up this number in the first column. Now, VLOOKUP function does not have these categories. When you're learning it for the first time, it's handy to see these categories, right? The way VLOOKUP does it is this. Still, our goal is to get the right maintenance charge in the cell, right? And if we, whatever number we type here, if we type in 100 here, the number here delivered better be 12. If I change it back to 1,000, the number delivered to this cell better be 750. All right, so how does VLOOKUP do it? Well, first it takes this number, it puts it in its brain, it remembers it. And check this out. This is the first column of our table. We are not going to use this. This is just for when you do it by hand or when you're learning. But VLOOKUP remembers this 1,000, and it looks through the first column. And when it bumps into the first bigger number than the 1,000, it jumps back a row. That's how it determines. Now notice it fits into the same category, but VLOOKUP doesn't look at the category. Races down, bumps into the first bigger one. Now, if we're racing, here we'll change this to 100, right? Races down, it finds the first bigger one and jumps back a row. That means if we're always bumping into one bigger, this first column has to be sorted from smallest to biggest. All right. Now, if this is 1,000, right? Once it's determined, boop, I hit 2,000, so I jump back. It knows the row. Now, this is going to be our table here, but that 750 is in not the first column where we look stuff up, but in the second column. So that means we take that 750 and put it there. In the third column is the 20 cents. All right, let's do it. Let's use the VLOOKUP function equals VL, and you can type it out, or once the drop-down screen tip is highlighted in blue, you can hit Tab. So VLOOKUP, open parentheses. And sure enough, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 arguments, each one separated by a comma. Just like we do it, we need to know what number to look up. So it says, what is the lookup value? That's the thing that determines the row number, your average balance. So boop, you click right there. You type a comma to get to the next argument. The table array. Well, we humans have the piece of paper, the table printed out on our desk, so we can look it up. But VLOOKUP doesn't know where it is. You have to tell it. So you highlight. And again, VLOOKUP doesn't use these categories. It uses the first column, bumps into the first bigger one, and you have to highlight the other columns besides the first, the second, and the third. Comma and the column index. Well, VLOOKUP is always going to take the 1,000 and bump into the first bigger one and determine a row. But this table, you can see that green, there's the first column, that's always where we look stuff up. But the second and third columns have the items we want to return to the cell. So 1, 2. Now again, we would do it this way. We'd look maintenance charge, and we'd read the field name at the top, and we know that that's the column. But VLOOKUP doesn't do that. It knows the table, and it can count. It counts the column. So this is 2, so we type 2. And sure enough, it will get that for us, 750, and bring it back to the cell. Now this final argument, if you type a comma, it's either approximate or exact match. Now approximate match just means it bumps into the first bigger one. That's the one we're going to use most of the time. If it was a word like a customer's name or an employee name or a product name, you'd use exact match because you're looking up words. But we're going to use true or approximate. Now here's the thing. VLOOKUP, it's programmed to always do approximate match. So you actually do not need this final argument. I'm going to backspace. That square brackets right there means that argument is optional. It will assume the default if you leave it out. And we're using approximate. Remember, approximate means bumping into the first bigger one. I always think of approximate as there's numbers, right? Are there numbers between 500 and 2,000? Yes. So we're getting an approximate match, meaning we're bumping into the first bigger one and jumping back. All right, I'm going to hit Enter. 750. That is amazing. Now let's test it. Let's change this to 2,000. Oh, exactly. It raced down the first column, it bumped into the first bigger one, and jumped back. And took the $5 and returned it here. If I change this to 4,000. Again, it takes the 4,000 in its brain, bumps into the first bigger one, goes over the second column, delivers a 5. Now let's do the per check charge. Now the per check charge is based on this too, because the correct category determines the row. The per check charge is in the third column, so we'll take that 10 cents in this case because we've determined that that's the row, and bring it down to this cell right here. You ready? Equals VL tab. What's the lookup value? The average balance determines the row number, comma. The table, you have to have a first column sorted from smallest to biggest, and then any subsequent columns of things you want to return to the cell, comma, column index. There's the table. It's using the first one to look something up. It could be the second one, or it could be the third one. Since the per check charge is in the third column, I type a 3. I'm doing bump into the first bigger one, approximate match, so I leave this argument off. Notice I could type a closed parentheses, but for simple functions like this, if you just enter it, I did Control Enter, it puts that remaining parentheses in for you. So that's pretty amazing. It's looking something up based on your average balance in a table and returning either the second or third column. So let's test it. I'm going to type 400. Yep, it took the 400, raced down here, bumped into the first bigger one, jumped back. It took the 12 from the second column, that 2 right there, put it in the cell. For the per check right here, took the 400, bounced into the first bigger one, got the row, took the 20 cents and put it back there. Why the 20 cents? Because that green table there has 3 columns. The 3 tells VLOOKUP, get the thing from the third column and return it to the cell. All right, so when you're learning VLOOKUP, you're given 1 or 2 examples, and you're like, it just doesn't make sense. So let's go through 7 or 8 other examples to help us understand how the VLOOKUP works and what it does. Here we have some sales reps and some sales. Each sales gets a certain commission rate. So Sue gets a certain commission rate because she sold 5,356. Here's a table. If we did it by hand, I need to deliver this commission rate from this column here to this cell. I look this up. I think about it in my brain. I look through the categories. It looks like 5,000 is between these 2 numbers, so that means that's the row. I need to then go to this column here and put 6.5%. 6.5. It's pre-formatted with percentage, and then I hit Enter. So Sue had this on this particular sale. It was 3,000. I can see that the category is that amount that I'm looking up fits into between these 2 numbers. So it's the second row. I know that I need to get the commission rate, so I come down here and I put 5. All right, how does VLOOKUP do it? It takes this number, it races down in this sorted column, and when it bumps into the first number bigger, it bumps into 6,000. It says 6,000 is bigger than that. So I jump back 1 row. And then I go over and get the 6.5%, and I put it here. Let's do it now. Equals VL tab. Got to tell VLOOKUP what to look up, comma. You got to give it a table where the first column is sorted, so it can bump into the first bigger one, and any subsequent columns with things to return to the cell. So I highlight 2 columns. I'm going to lock this because I'm going to copy this formula down, and I do not want that lookup table to move as I copy it. So I'm going to hit the F4 key. Absolute cell reference, relative cell reference. That's the table, comma. Notice that table, the first column it's looking up in, but it's the second column that has the thing I want to return. So for column index, I type 2. Control Enter. Double click and send it down. I'm going to go to this Sue right here and hit F2. It took the 3,000, it raced down here, bumped into the first one bigger, jumped back a row. It got from the second column that 5%, and VLOOKUP delivered it to the cell. All right, let's look at another example. Tax rate. So I'm going to start with 750. The idea is, if you're doing this by hand, notice I don't have the categories here. I just did it the VLOOKUP way. And in some ways, it's easier, right? You don't have to read all this stuff here, right? I mean, VLOOKUP, after you get used to it, is a little bit easier. You just say, hey, I'm looking this up. I race down here. I bump into the first number bigger. I jump back a row. First column is sorted. Second column, in this case, has the thing I want to return it to the cell. I need 3.5%. That's pre-formatted, so that percentage pops up. I don't want to do it by hand like that because I want to be able to type whatever here. 90 bucks. Then I want it to change. You can see that didn't change, right? So I'm going to do equals VL tab. Lookup value. That's what VLOOKUP is going to look up. The table. The first column is sorted. Bumps into the first bigger value. Second or subsequent columns have values we want to return. That's our table. We only have 2 columns. Column index. Tax rate is the thing I want to return, so I type a 2. I'm going to leave that argument off because by default, it does the bump into the bigger one. Control Enter. Now if I change this to 90 bucks, it better give me 1%. How does VLOOKUP do it? 90 bucks, it's looking. Bump. Hits the first bigger one. It goes back here. Second column delivers it to the cell. Let's look at another example. Square feet. So if you are a contractor, you have different square footages, and your job is to build a drainage system. So you need to know the correct pipe size. If it's 750 square feet, you need to race through the first column looking for the first number bigger than 750. I hit it. I jump back. I need to take that 18. That's the pipe size and return it to the cell. So VLOOKUP is always looking something up in a sorted table with the first column sorted, finds the correct match in the first column, which determines the row, and then finds something and returns it to the cell. Equals VLOOKUP, lookup value, comma, table, sorted first column, finds the match, bumps into the first bigger one, comma, column index. We only have 2 here, right? You have to tell VLOOKUP what column has the thing you want to return to the cell, so you type it 2. We don't need the final argument. 18. If I change this to 50, it better give me 10. Bump into the first bigger one, get the 10, bring it back. Now let's look at another example here. We're going to look at a grading example. Here's just a simple grade table. And we want to look up, for our first example, decimal grade. Now here, student got 151. We're going to race through this column here, bump into the first number bigger, jump back. We have the decimal grade from the 4th column, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to take that 3 and return it here. For letter grade, a different student in a different situation, you have 170. You race through here, jump into the first bigger one, determines the row. But here, we want to return something from the 3rd column, so we get a B. All right, so let's use VLOOKUP. VL tab, our lookup value. I'm going to look that number up, comma, the table, first column sorted from biggest to smallest, highlight subsequent columns, table array, comma, we want the decimal grade, so we count the green table. The 4th column contains the thing we want to return, so I simply type a 4. Doing an approximate match, so we leave that 4th argument off, enter. If I change this to 90, the VLOOKUP bumps into the first bigger one, looks at the entire table, takes the value from the 4th column, and returns it here. For letter grade, look up the points, first column sorted from biggest to smallest. I'm going to highlight 3 columns. The thing we want to return is in the 3, so after table array, we type a comma and 3. Right? Numbers are always aligned to the right. Text is always aligned to the left. That's looking good. If we change this to 177, should be a B+. Now, VLOOKUP. What happens in this case? We have a span from 0 to 200. What if, and in this situation this wouldn't happen, what if we got minus 50? The VLOOKUP function is going to be polite because it takes that and races through this. But if the first value in the first row is bigger than this, it just says, hey, I can't find it in the table. And it tells you that by, when I hit enter here, not available. If I give it a value bigger than the last value in the table, no problem. Remember, it races through, finds the first bigger one. When it doesn't find a bigger one, so this one will be 212, it just takes the last row. So the span of values for this cell can be from 0, anything 0 or above, the VLOOKUP will handle. The one situation is when something's below. So -5, it's polite. It says, hey, it's not available. Something in the middle of the table, it delivers it. Something bigger, 250. Wow, it's still going to give us the last one. Now, another thing about VLOOKUP and approximate match. I'm going to change this back to 177. What we say for VLOOKUP, takes this in its brain, races down, finds the first one bigger, and jumps back. That's a metaphor. That is a great way when you're learning how VLOOKUP works to understand how it works. Technically, that's not how it works. Technically, it does a binary search, which is incredibly fast. But we're not computer programmers. We don't need to know about that. We just need to know how it works. And the idea that sorted column, bump into the first bigger one, jump back to return the row, absolutely beautiful way to understand how it works. All right, let's look at another example. We're going to look at this next commission rate example. Now, we've actually already looked at a commission rate. And I want to go back up to that table and remind ourselves what we did there. Here, that VLOOKUP, and the way a lot of commissions work is it looks up the actual sales number. In the first column, it bumps into the bigger one and gets it, right? And that makes sense. The bigger your sales, the higher your commission rates. But there are all sorts of ways of calculating commissions. And another way that commissions are calculated sometimes, let's go down here, it's just flat out done by contract. So in this case, the company has 3 sales reps, Sue, Chin, Twinette, and each one has a different contractual rate. Sue gets 5, Chin gets 6.5, and Twinette gets 7.55%. So when we do a VLOOKUP here, we are not using the sales number. We're actually using their name, right? It's not a tier. The more you sell, the more your commission. It's just a flat contractual rate. So we're going to be using the name in this column as our lookup value. Find a match here. So if we're looking up Chin, VLOOKUP is still going to look up Chin. Keep it in its memory. But it's going to go through and find an exact match. I'm going to find exactly CHIN. Once I find that, it tells me the row. I take the 6.5% and I deliver this to the cell, right? VLOOKUP is going to, let's do equals VL. Lookup value, I'm looking up, not the sales, I'm looking up the sales rep name, comma, the table. First column has the sales rep names. It's going to try and find an exact match. The second or subsequent columns have the values we want to return. There's our table, comma. Second column has the commission rate, so I type a 2. And this fourth argument, either approximate or exact. Now, we've been doing approximate, and we know that's the default, so we never have to put it in. But if you're doing exact match, you're looking up a sales rep, an employee, a customer name, a product name. You got to use this exact match. Now, they use true and false, and a lot of functions do, because there's 2 options, right? So this is kind of arbitrary. You don't really have to think of true and false. Use the drop down and just double click on exact match. It puts false in. I wish they would have put the word exact match, for at least for beginners. Now, another option is, if you, after doing this for a while, 1 in computer language means true and 0 means false, so that will work also. That's what I usually do. But if you're a beginner and you're learning, just read. It says exact match. You're like, yeah, that's what I want. Double click, close your eyes, don't look at the false. Just realize I clicked exact match, close parentheses, and Control Enter. That will do it. We're doing a different kind of lookup. We're exactly looking up the word Chin. Now I'm going to double click and send this down. Oops. I got all sorts of junk here, so I come back here. F2 to put it in edit mode. I forgot to lock these. So I'm going to highlight. Actually, you can come down here. F2, right? You can see how the table moved. Don't want that. So I come up here, F2, F2. Highlight. I highlight that and hit the F4 key to lock the $sign and say, hey, that table is locked down as an absolute cell reference. Control Enter, double click, and send it down. So now if I hit here, click in cell C82, hit the F2 key, I can see, sure enough, table locked. It's looking up exactly Sue and delivering that 5% here. It's looking up exactly Twinette and delivering the 7.5%. Now we're doing exact match here, but there is a way, if you have names, to do approximate match. And that's kind of convenient because it's easier to enter the formula for approximate match. And all you'd have to do is, if you have these names in the first column sorted, instead of SCT, it was Chin, Sue, and Twinette, sorted alphabetically, then you could just use the approximate match. So let's come down here. Our last example. Here we have this. It's easy to sort. You sort the first column, and sorting means you have the field names at the top, some words that say what data goes in this column. You simply click one cell in the column you want to sort, and when you sort, you have to have blanks all the way around. That's why I didn't put this note right next to it. If it's touching, it becomes part of the table. So you want blanks all the way around. But sorting is just right-click, sort. And I'm going to do A to Z. Now, notice Chin 6.5. Sometimes you get nervous when you're sorting a table, and you're not sure that the records will remain true. But right-click, sort. I have one cell selected, A to Z. And sure enough, exactly perfect. Now that you have the first column sorted, you don't have to do exact match. So I'm going to look up the name, comma, the table. F4, comma, second column has the value I want to return, so I type it 2, and I just leave it. The default for this, if I leave it out, is approximate match. Why can I do that? Because that's sorted. Whenever you can sort, sort. Double click and send it down, and sure enough, we retrieved for Twinette 7.55%. All right, so we did a lot in this video. We tried to answer the question, what exactly does VLOOKUP do, and what's the purpose of VLOOKUP? What does it do? It looks up some amount and retrieves something from a table, so this 5, and brings it back to a cell. VLOOKUP for approximate match takes the thing in its brain, races down, hits the first bigger one, jumps back so it knows the row. I told it the column 2, so it took that 5 and delivered it to the cell. The purpose of VLOOKUP, to make our life easy. If I change this to 1,000, instantly this updates. And of course, for these examples, what's the purpose? When you have a whole column of things you're looking up, man, is it easy and fast. All right, we'll see you next video.